Perspective of encyclopedic documentary science and archiving of scientific data. Based on development gradations of virtual environment and information systems of communication, significant aspect functioning and development is ascertaining that shape electronic encyclopedia has taken and possibilities statement for improving its interface in effective way to increase functionality coverage. Digital information environment recreated many interpretive and integrative mechanisms for building and systematizing knowledge, where, first of all, regarding encyclopedic data format, it is worth considering that this documentary scientific material is not subject to arbitrary interpretations, does not contain interference signs of someone's private interests which can to influence on organization of knowledge and about containing platform of them. These criteria make encyclopedia for convenient platform to building coherent scientific environment and community, which sets vector for improvement of electronic documentary materials. Accentuating on structural aspects of knowledge system and information environment, sooner or later in encyclopedia will be made documentary video archive, in which should be excluded arbitrary videos, only documentaries, scientific and educational lectures. Also will be made biographical archive and functions with clear criteria for compiling biography, which will be widely disseminated in world documentary practice. It is will bring jurisprudence into sphere of electronic communications, and will give institutional format to electronic communications. Function of archiving biographical data and scientific knowledge in general will lead to creation of social platform for structuring high-quality information, where will appear discussion base of communications for people who have direct or indirect relationship to science and functioning of electronic encyclopedia, which is very important role for digital environment and whole civilization from point of view by selection of those qualities that make knowledge to most effective in applicability and for content. From this it follows that over time, server archiving of all information types, text, literary, video, photo, audio, will occur to categories and degrees of information quality, significance, will gradually appear holographic, three-dimensional photos and videos formats as soon as with technological elaboration of three-dimensional spheres for holographic image projection. Technologies will move to increase of manipulative capabilities for environmental impact, which in one way or another will transform format of visual technologies. Holographic format will expand projection parameters and will be modulate through conventional pocket device. Spatial coordination opens way to physical and mathematical forecasting. There will be varieties scientific stylistics in design of knowledge by one scientific area, for example, German scientific style of materials design in chemistry, scientific style of United States in chemistry, etc. Determination of information style on basis to one platform will significantly expand range of research and will accelerate scientific development, since different approaches will not overlap. Biographical context of personal data archiving, with regulation their availability, will contribute to formation social network inform documenting reliable people's lives facts, will be biometric identification for logging into system, including the launch of computing equipment. Grandchildren will able to read historical information about their grandparents. Electronic genealogical trees of documentary and scientific, genetic type. In the making of develop influence from verification principles for constructing information, encyclopedia can be woven into medical practice for keeping of dynamics updating to scientific statistics and to forming biographies pathographies. In addition is also factor of high-quality control to medical institutions work by archived part and by means of public documentary resources, which will to large extent exclude of extremism manifestation in medicine and such phenomenon as punitive medicine. Perhaps progression of microelectronics will eventually lead to creation of new operating system, when this is required by modification of electronic circuits logic, including holography that technically changes the image method, due to which has long been visited by me idea of creating operating system with name tree, which to image of growing tree will have root system and like grain will unfold when loading and further building work functions, trunk, roots, branches, leaves, fruits, among which may appear holographic label house sewn into original base of operating system called encyclopedia. Encyclopedia with its search standards system, security filters and wiring functions of quality in virtual environment, where biographical data will be compiled for persons who want create biography to based on documentary model. This will start by default from moment of user registered in encyclopedia, and maybe from first launch of future operating system with biometric user verification for digital identification in institutional and law everyday circumstances, including cross-border travels, in consequence of electronic biometrics will to qualify as identity cards, thereby determining format of encyclopedic social network. You will not need documents. Your body and all its changes will be technologically documented. No arbitrary presentation of information, only specific articles and information that have passed stage of digital filtering according to information standards criteria, literature and documentaries of all existing forms. Logical authenticity will play a huge role in building progressive civilization and create intelligible standards for information presentation, will appear information and digital ethics jurisprudence. Encyclopedia will become everyday and more all-encompassing digital environment, will be endowed with opportunities for integration with institutes, with universities, with educational system, with medicine, with legislative system, will become valuable source of knowledge and scientific information to all industrial spheres of civilization. Virtual biography will be able to combine all types of public organizations and services in appeal of biographical functions to state institutions, including commerce, medicine, education, employment, any social services. Everything can be reflected and implemented through virtual biography with according to its different sections, which will stop segmentation of data in virtual environment and normalize them in generalization under each user of verification approaches to digital documentation. Further, encyclopedic criteria for verifying quality of information will be able to extrapolate to social improvement and people life way, that is to take direct part in organization of public institutions and life in general. Development of electronics and increase in computing performance will consistently build all events detail and knowledge. That is today, in order to find out something about unfamiliar plant, you need to find out its name. You need to find its accordance and find information about it using search engines, compare with other information and check its quality without any guarantees of reliability. When in long term, information quality criteria will be put into filters, indistinct or inaccurate information will not pass through them and remain in dirty area. Moreover, you do not need to look for name of plant. You aim camera with identification search functions and all information straight from encyclopedia will be displayed on screen, and later on glasses or on computing technologies integrated with nervous system, including people you meet and information available about them. These functions can be adjusted about automation, where, when and how extensively information will be displayed relatively encountered objects or objects to which attention and interest. Search algorithms will become objective, three-dimensional, will be able to recognize events and objects in real space, will be able to detail their properties and qualities, and most importantly, their dynamics, behavior and perspective of such. That is, computational algorithms will rush to predict events. This opportunity will become subject of global competition for advantage by prediction accuracy and prediction range. After all, it is no wonder about awareness of who, what and how will do after exact amount of time, how and what scale circumstances will be formed. Informing and forecasting precision as opens up opportunities for civilization that bypass even nuclear weapons in terms of degree influence on situation in global technological confrontation of competing parties, since ability to predict situation it is in detail shows even applicability of nuclear weapons, and therefore shows possibility of bypassing or excluding it use due to prognostication length. Imagine that you are always 1 minute ahead of all civilization. Well, imagine being an hour or year ahead. Correctness in these matters eliminates mistakes and damage from them, opens up most effective and successful moves. However, we are talking about structure of all events, both in terms of security issues and in terms of peaceful technologies development. Encyclopedic format should become all-encompassing way of sorting and drafting information. Having lost image of private initiatives like image of modern social networks, there shouldn't be slightest hint of commercial data segmentation and arbitrariness information interpretation in third parties' interests, which will negatively affect to resource reputation. So manifestation tendency to increase productivity of organizing virtual environ. Exclusively neutral coordination of documentary format for compiling information, massive encyclopedic archive with integration elements into technogenesis and sociogenesis progression, management of institutional foundations and their combination to schematic structural sequence for differentiation of civilizational maxim in society. Social gradations from activity differentiation to inbreeding. This article will focus on biogenic gradations with pronounced cyclicality in sociogenetic processes of civilizational stage by human nature development. Natural course of development. Hereditary qualities of people in few groups was and remains inbreeding, recessive reduction of diversity in genome and differentiation to stable hereditary qualities in course of population closure, examples of which in mankind history are sufficient, including meter-long hobbits and pygmies. This is one side of sociogenesis course, which has pronounced cyclical stages in process of large-scale civilization gradations, not only in relation to stage when humanity was not so numerous and tribal groups closed much more often, but with an increase in populations quantitatively and locally, processes became longer in achieving inbreeding sustainability, which each time led to segmentation of vast social groups and collapse of all civilizational agglomerations that existed hitherto without looking at significant addition of migration factor, which changed sociogenetic processes formally. Fact is that in large groups, as in small groups, social dominant, greatest activity, maxim of this or that form of dominance and influence is differentiated, but this process is linear and does not have renewed stability. It is expressed psycho-emotionally as socialization leading to top, which no longer gets along in stability, and territorially, it is usually consequence of social tightness. But stage of social maxim is replaced every time by inbreeding segmentation of society leading to diffusion processes and refinement of behavior tactics. Society is segmented up to biogenic closures according to behavioral factor. Each maxim is physically replaced by balance and recession leading to more balanced state, precisely from physical point of view, because from point of view by ethics and sociology, balance and gradation to balance can be total decline. Therefore, the social maxim must always should grow up in intellectual format, otherwise decline of balancing will total stopping. In numerous groups, this process proceeds most slowly and unevenly, more steadily due to change of generations with approximate natural or behavioral qualities that smoothly flow into each other, but gradual process, even at global level, goes in same direction, and it is quite pronounced and consistent. This means that without renewal and controllability of sociogenetic gradations, civilization biogenically and genetically follows dead end, that is, way out of situation is exclusively cognitive. It can never be intuitive or emotionally hormonal. This is exclusively factor of science and technology. Beckhouse: without this way out there will be nothing, nothing at all. Process of inbreeding is most productive in case of intellect differentiation, which is greatest in history of civilization, when there is not general grinding, but natural deformations leading to neurological differentiation of productive thinking, which underlies at evolutionarily increase by human central nervous system, when climatic restructuring of endocrine hormonal metabolism is precisely in process of inbreeding. Recession opens niche for neurological potentials, including territorially, where nature is replete with food sources. Cold climate slows down population growth and increases inbreeding factor in small groups. On other hand, in warm climate, process of inbreeding is slower, but more extensive, that is, excluding potential for productive and positive breeding in future and on full scale, where migration factor complements not breeding productivity, but those factors that are already steadily following trajectory of inbreeding segmentation and sociogenetic closure. Genome recession in course of long-term closely related crossing is determined stability of hereditary traits, but also smoothing out their diversity and adaptive dynamism from generation to generation, which looks like morphological rigidity, so frog will not become something as monkey, and monkey will not become whale. These are examples of irreversible evolutionary dead ends. Unless, of course, symbiotic proliferation factor does not change their recession in progressive vector, which is unlikely for terrestrial environment, since wide range of organic variations has been passed over by hundreds millions years. Therefore, organics can be brought out from evolutionary dead end only by scientific method using complex molecular manipulations. But through genetic recession is actively neuromorphic growth, which tends to become evolutionarily rigid in inherited parameters too. This is how mammals and humans appeared, when by somatic recession and by metabolic activity the ratio of nervous tissue volume and volume of other tissues in individuals' organisms began to significantly change. But as in amphibians and insects, entire implementation of hereditary traits occurs purely genetically with minimal organic rearrangement under environment influence, kind of adaptive specificity narrowing and smoothing of diversity in genome, including reduction in size, which is expressed to absence of adaptive changes by during one individual life and with minimum changes between generations hereditarily. These are signs of genetic recession reduction, including those related to neuromorphology. Fact is that, people also heading to recessive evolutionary deadlock by genetically, if he does not start using entire potential of civilization to solve these problems. Therefore, if intellectual maxim in civilization that has accumulated today does not play productive way out of emerging gradations in scientific and technological manner to next 20 years, then civilization will disappear in next 200 years, since next 20 years all over world in all influence spheres there will be change of generations, that is, if younger generations do not come to new industrialization of modernization format, then movement to dead end will be irreversible, where factor of social balancing by physical potentials is actively playing, which minuses any neurological potential in form of balancing results, where large is constantly equalized to less. Here, physics itself shows decline even outside inbreeding processes, especially in clarifying relationship, but oddly enough, this also plays on inbreeding recessive closure of population. Moreover, across planet, there is general shrinking of species in size, which has not yet affected only whales, but already affects. This led to emergence of people and intellect, but equalizing shredding continues to smaller one, and as gradations of genesis show, reverse increase in species does not occur or it cannot occur in inert natural way, therefore situation rests exclusively on science and most rationality. Natural mutations do not give way out of this situation, they play on recession and pathogenic accumulation, when number of deviations increases, that is, variations in hereditary and behavioral deviations increase decline, since they serve as factor of diffusion and qualities smoothing, but not their differentiation. Hypothetically, in natural way, something can and will grow neurologically, rats are pygmies, but we are talking about fact that maximum peaks of intelligence have already been passed and reached, further in noticeable way or only decrease is observed. Therefore, we are talking exclusively about scientific and technological detailing of sociogenesis for formation by most productive biogenic way out of civilizational difficulties. Accumulation of scientific knowledge and population growth led to industrialization, but population growth due to territorial freedom gave neurological maxim where neurological maxim had population increase in form of greatest rationality, including regionally and migratory, because intelligence actively migrated around world throughout entire 20th century like never before. Further, situation changes by fact that migration potential decreases, factor of social tightness is growing in form of population growth is uneven, not as before, and it accelerates not in favor of neurological maxim. In addition, process of socialization creates an increase in antagonistic factors of detriment to rationality and its growth, that is, Here, not just breaking and deceleration, there is disappearance, that is recession. Therefore, liberal market type of organization by international relations, which opens up freedoms of mass order, on other hand, restricts growth of reasonable maximum among population in same insufficiently selective way, creates decline and its own destruction. Since it is population growth of neurological maxim that underlies by everything built over last 200 years. Modern change in population gradients formally and behaviorally leads to acceleration of neurological decline, where institutionalization capable of containing decline is either not created or is eroded by social inertia. Migration clots of greatest rationality are not sufficiently stable in reproduction and are subject to social diffusion, which also concerns regionalized potentials. So far as process of socialization in all world goes in one direction, its gradations have approximate form in different regions of planet. Way out of this situation is simple. Either it is an inert failure, or institutionalized controlled acceleration of industrial modernization at international level, since regionalization and generalized course of socialization as clogs potential of rationality to disappearing by it. When normal everyday life becomes problematic, then everything else, absolutely everything, becomes problematic. Degree problematicity of conditions by all-encompassing order creates preconditions for problematicity in all other areas that have connection with zone of reduced results. Therefore, maxima and minima must have physical boundaries, otherwise minimum minus maximum. But it is important to clearly define minimum as expressed, and maximum as expressed in gradations. Sum of organic gradations. Primarily, integration of organic forms with each other gives increase in metabolic parameters, but in combined form, this process is limited by combination of form in organic sequence, which plays role in reducing size of living species, since complex sequences at reaching certain limits tend to be reduced in one way or another, where it opens niche of species neurological growth, when their somatics begins to be exhausted or suppressed for one reason or another, including climate, where warm-bloodedness provides nutrition in neuromorphic growth direction. Kind of lipidization and glucosation of metabolism in terms by energy exchange, lipidization of animal species due to glucosation of plant species by expansion flowering part and fruit crops. But what next? After all, the nervous tissue also has its own molecular evolutionary limitations, where there are also decline gradations or reduction. Moreover, after oceanic integrations of organic matter and giant lizards emerging from there, we do not have single example from increase in size of living forms with musculoskeletal system, if we do not take into account the amount population growth and nervous system growth in relation to somatic mass. It is proliferative expansion kind of different directions intensity, and according to other indicators there is decline, which ultimately overlaps by individuals' number, where modification can be only integrative and symbiotic, mutagenic, that does not guarantee large evolutionary leaps. At least it is impossible to accurately predict for today, but this with 100% probability guarantees disappearance of civilization if it does not find predictable way to lead itself by productive technological and organic solutions. Therefore, output can be exclusively cognitive and neurological, as long as this factor will not exhaustion itself. That is, organic inertia of nature will no longer provide solutions of ascending order by her own. Combinative factor of organic matter is quite low in environment of combinatively established life forms, and following inertial path from organic matter as marks about civilization disappearance. Way out can only be cognitive. Through careful search for scientific solutions to overcome limitations of biogenic and other orders, including social limitations of mental format, since an inert change in species from combinative integrative way by organic reasons at least provokes pathologization and extinction, and only after formation for something new or germination for existing one enduring liberation to spatial niches in world, probably having some degree of high adaptability, as mammals expansion. Actively replacing after endangered giants. Planet actually has temporary climatic reserve for such shifts, when some organic forms, not looking at organic conservative stability, will be supplemented and deformed by others, but one cannot even assume that something more perfect will be formed in this way than high intelligence of nervous forms or, for example, more intensive metabolism with greater intensity of thinking in differentiated tissues that play innervation role. Or may be similar to appearance of flowering plants in symbiotic crosses course, which formed large-scale expansive vector in plant forms evolution, but climatic and temporal reserves change significantly and are limited formally, including with relation to organic parameters and sequences. After all, climatic and physical range of habitats is wide enough in our planet from long time, neither in cold polar latitudes, nor in arid deserts, nor in dark depths of oceans there is no rapid development of life. It is stagnant conservative zones for evolution, which are exhausted combinatively and variably. Moreover, their organic intensity and scale are diminishing. Maxim of organic abilities is differentiated today and probably at last frontier, since there is no integrative potential, which was in more from archaic life forms, when one type of cell, fabric, molecule creates symbiosis with another type of cell and this forming global evolutionary vector. That is, for such gradients, required decay or destructive deformation from existing life forms, mass extinction that opens up space and food niches to other species and combinative variations of organic matter appearing, filling this space in future. For which there are no longer climatic conditions and integrative variations, we can say that their greatest number has already been implemented on this planet by inert way through repeated mass extinctions. Therefore, gradients of evolutionary scales can be forming in perspective an exclusively scientific and predictable way. If we consider exclusively the growth of adaptability intelligent life and organics as entire, since organic sequences have limiting values for variations of organic matter existing today on Earth. And these limits are embodied by us to certain extent.